What you're about to see may shock you. This is my favorite guitars from Gibson's The Collection. What is up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Steve. Welcome to Guitar Gear Trader channel. Today on the show, Happy New Year, by the way. Today on the show, what I'd like to talk about is a YouTube channel or a show on YouTube. I kind of call it TV now because that's really where I watch all my content. I barely watch traditional TV anymore. I'm constantly just on YouTube now. But one show that has really, I won't say had an impact on my life, but it definitely has influenced this channel, and the host of this show has definitely influenced this channel and influenced my knowledge about guitar, and that is The Collection by Gibson. If you are watching this show, then you have definitely seen Gibson's The Collection before. It's on Gibson TV on YouTube. That's their own channel. And if you search out Gibson TV, or if you just search up The Collection, Gibson, all the episodes will come up. This show is hosted by Mark Agnesi. And just to give you guys a quick kind of like history lesson about that, Mark is or was, I want to say like a manager of some sorts, or an employee of Norman's Rare Guitars in California. And he was an employee there for a very long time. And I first stumbled upon Mark during COVID. Now, I know when I found him, he had already been doing it for a while, but he started doing something called the Guitar of the Day, Norman's Guitars of the Day, or Guitar of the Day at Norman's Rare Guitars. And every day he would showcase one vintage guitar, and he would give you a quick, they weren't long videos, and they were maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 minute videos, maybe a little longer, maybe a little less. But he would showcase one guitar, and it was the same format every time. It was him in the back room at Norm's, and he would talk to you about the models, right? So on Tuesdays, it was supposed to be like Telly Tuesdays. And most of the time he showed you a Telly on a Tuesday, and he would go in the back and he would tell you the year that it was made, why that particular year was special from different years. And he teaches you about how to know certain things about vintage guitars, right? So from year to year, manufacturers might change a pickup or a pickup location, or the logo location on the headstock, or the logo style, or maybe they had 3 bolts on the neck instead of 4 bolts on the neck from one year to another year. And it really, really helped me understand and learn about vintage guitars. Before I started watching the Guitar of the Days, I didn't really know much about vintage stuff. I was only interested in stuff that was new, and I've only gotten to play stuff that was new. But once I started listening to Mark, you learn what's the difference between a Firebird 1, 3, 5, and 7. You learn the difference between a 60s, 70s, 80s Les Pauls, right? Pancake bodies versus non-pancake bodies, versus script logos or spaghetti logos on Fenders. Really interesting stuff, and very, very informative. Whenever I'm looking to trade or buy a guitar, the first thing I do, or one of the first things I do, is I go to YouTube and I type in Guitar of the Day, 1964 Gretsch Tennessean or whatever, so I can learn about that model as much as I can, so I can make sure that the thing the person is selling me is the real deal, the real thing. And it was extremely informative. I actually got the opportunity to meet and buy a guitar from Mark Agnesi here in Nashville. It's amazing. It really is amazing who you meet in Nashville. There are so many musicians, so many people that are important in the music industry. And I've met and I've traded with people that have written #1 hits I traded a Martin for an ES335 that wrote the song "There Was This Girl," the Riley Green song. Um, I had that guitar that song was written on. That was pretty cool. I met the guitar tech for Bob Dylan and bought a 12 string from him. I met Mark Agnesi, and it was funny because the thing that I got from Mark Agnesi was a Craigslist ad. It was a Fender Telecaster, 1997 Telecaster, standard, American standard. And he didn't know it was him. He was selling it on Craigslist and he wanted a really good price. And I asked, as any good guitar buyer, trader is going to do, they asked for $50 off. And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. And met him at a parking lot in Guitar Center in Brentwood, Tennessee. And he was the nicest guy and really, really down to earth. Talked to me for about 10, 15 minutes about schools in the area and guitars a little bit here and there. He gave me some insight into a future episode of the collection, which I won't spoil because I don't know if it actually is going to happen or not. The person that he told me that was going to be on the show hasn't been on the show as of yet, and I met him with that guitar about a year or two ago. So I'm not sure if that's even going to happen. So I don't even want to say it, but if it does, it's going to be unbelievable. I can't wait for that episode. But really down to earth guy, really super cool. I ran into him this Thanksgiving over at Dollywood. I think I scared the crap out of him. I was like, "Hey, Mark Agnesi, how you doing?" I got my denim jacket on. Hope I did a good Mark Agnesi impression at the opening of the show. But what I want to do is I love watching this show. I absolutely love watching this show, and I this is one of those things that I constantly rewatch as a guitar fan. There are 5 or 6 episodes of the collection that I really, really enjoy and watch over and over again. There are I want to say there are about 14 to 15 episodes. And what I did was I compiled a collection of my favorite 10 guitars from the series for this year. I tried to pick one guitar per episode. Obviously, I couldn't do that because there are more episodes than 10. Not all the episodes are favorites of mine, but and I'd like to just go through the 5 from 10 to 6, and then on the next episode, I'll do 5 to 1. So let's jump into that real quick. And before we jump into that, do me a favor, subscribe to me on YouTube. Also follow me on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Guitar Gear Trader. I'd appreciate all the subs and all the comments. Please leave your comments below about how do you feel about the guitars? Which guitars would you have chosen from each of these episodes? What are your favorites? Why would you take them? I got some really, really good comments on my previous videos from people about some guitars that they have. And big shout out to Jeff, who bought one of the Les Paul. He bought the Les Paul Gold Top that I was trying to look for on my Reverb Guitar Safari the other day. And he sent me some pictures of it, and that was really awesome. So thank you for sharing that, Jeff. Appreciate it. But yeah, subscribe on YouTube, hit that bell, and let's get into it. So number 10 on my list is one of my favorite musicians, and he is Charlie Starr of Blackberry Smoke. And this was a tough one because there are lots of guitars of Charlie's that I would have taken, and that's how I did this. What I did was, like, I'm getting their guitar. If I had a Genie lamp or whatever, and I had the ability to go in and they would give me one guitar of my choice. So I get their guitar. So I know it plays well. I know it's set up right. I know the action's all right. I know it's going to be a good player. But there were 2 guitars that I really liked from Charlie that I actually have very, very close pieces of. All right. So he has like a 1965 ES330. I have one right there over my shoulder. It's a little blurry, but I have it right there over my shoulder. I talk about that guitar all the time. Mine's a 67. His is a 65. Same color. And so I wouldn't take that one because I already have one that's really similar to it. He also has a 1964 cherry red ES335 with a Bigsby on it. And I have a 1971 ES335 with a Bigsby on it. Same appointments. Custom made sticker on it or a plaque. block inlays. It had the trapeze tailpiece. Originally came stock with trapeze tailpiece. I put the Bigsby on it. It looks exactly like his. So the only other guitars that I really thought would be that I would like from Charlie are these juniors. He is a big fan of single pickup guitars. He loves playing juniors. I've seen them live about 6 times now. And those juniors just rip. Those things just rip. And if you've seen this episode, this is a really, really cool example of a Polaris White SG Junior. It's really beat up. On the back, it has all this wear marks from whoever was playing it. It looks like 2 tire treads going down the neck from headstock all the way down to the body. I really dig the vibe that it gives, and it just, when Charlie plays it, it just sings. There's no way I'd get it to sing like he would. So that's number 10. Number 9. Now, this is an interesting one because John Shanks is probably someone that not a lot of people know. His name, or even his face necessarily isn't one that I don't think is as out there right now. Charlie Starr, I don't think is going to be known by the masses like somebody who maybe like Joe Perry or something like that. Guitar players, people like you and me are going to know Charlie Starr. People like you and me are going to know John Shanks. But if I showed this guy's picture to my brother, who also plays guitar, my brother's not going to know who John Shanks is. John Shanks is an amazing songwriter, producer, played with Bon Jovi and a whole bunch of other bands. Guy can play his butt off with the best of them. And he has, wow, what a collection this guy has. Holy cow. Like, this guy has, he's got Les Paul Customs, vintage Les Paul Customs lying around his house like they're used tissues. But he has some amazing things, and it was really hard to pick stuff from this episode. I watch this episode all the time. But the one I always come back to is my number 9 choice here, and that's John Shanks's Pelham Blue Trini Lopez. Now, this show has gone through like an evolution since it began as far as the production of it goes. You'll see later on that one of my choices, and a bunch of these, I have to type in the words there at the bottom, put the font in there for who it is, what year it is, what guitar it is. Now, when you watch the show now, it's all really well produced, like a TV show. They have silhouettes of the guitars with the names and the years. This was an early episode. I think this was like episode 3, and they didn't like showcase each guitar. They just kind of like just grabbed stuff and started talking, and I love that. Like I kind of prefer the early versions of this show, but I still absolutely love the current versions. The current versions are more half interview, half let's look at guitars, where the earlier versions of this show were grab as many guitars as you can find and tell me what year it is and tell me why it's cool. I think you get through more guitars that way than when you do large chunks of interviews in between. But those interviews are so great because Mark is a great interviewer, and the stories that he gets out of these musicians are well worth it. So keep doing what you're doing. Don't change a thing. But I am a sucker for Pelham Blue guitars. I love Pelham Blue guitars. I don't like blue Les Pauls, but I do love a good Pelham Blue Trini Lopez, a Pelham Blue SG, which this is the first 5 minutes of this episode, and you see 3 Pelham Blue guitars in the first 5 minutes. You see this Pelham Blue Trini, you see a Pelham Blue 65 SG, and you see a Pelham Blue, I want to say SG Melody Maker 12 string, which is I've never seen before, which is really cool. But I also only like Pelham Blue when it ages, right? It ages to that really soft, greeny blue, which is really, really nice. When you get a brand new Pelham Blue guitar, it's a lot different than how that paint ages over time with that yellowing of the nitro coating on it. This guitar in this episode, they kind of just passed over real quick, so they don't tell you the year of this guitar. So that's why I don't have the year there. But I can only assume that it's a 60s Trini Lopez. I can only imagine. But they do some close-ups on it. The white binding is yellowed over a little bit. There's lots of finish checking. It's not a Murphy Lab guitar because he got it from the original owner, and that original owner, he said, took the money that he bought the guitar with. Well, he took the money that John Shanks bought the guitar with from him and went and got himself a cool custom shop Les Paul, and then he gave some money to his kids, which it's a good story. It's a really cool story. So John Shanks takes care of the people that he buys guitars from, much like I'm assuming Joe Bonamassa does too. Joe Bonamassa says a lot of nice things about when he buys guitars from people and keeps it in the family and stuff like that. So that's my number 9. John Shanks, Pelham Blue, Trini Lopez. Coming in at number 8, we have a non-Gibson guitar. Now, that's another thing that I really, really like about this show. Mark is a lover of guitars. Mark knows that we are lover of guitars, and he's not afraid to show you a Fender or a Gretsch or a Rickenbacker or a Duesenberg or a BC Rich or whatever else is out there that these musicians have. And Mike Campbell is the only person in this show to end up on my top 10 list twice. Okay, so keep that in mind. See if you can figure out where else he's going to sit. But Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are in my top 3 bands of all time. They might be number 2 or number 3. The Beatles, number 1. Not going to tell you what number 2 is because I'm going to catch a lot of hate for number 2. But especially if I put them over Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. But Mike Campbell is one of my favorite guitar players of all time. Why I like him is because he's not a shredder, right? I'm sure he can shred. I'm sure he can do some really amazing fast licks and stuff on the guitar. But that's not what he does in his music. He puts the right notes in at the right times for the purpose of the song and not for the purpose of himself. I am like I've said it before. I don't shred. I don't want to shred. Well, I would love to shred, but I just don't shred. It's not my thing. I don't have the skills for it. I just love being musical and putting notes and highlights in music where I feel that they need to be. And I got that inspiration from Mike Campbell and the way that he plays. He just puts the perfect bends and the perfect vibrato in places that just make the song so special. And that 1950 Fender Broadcaster is on all of the early Tom Petty stuff. And that's my favorite Tom Petty stuff. The early stuff is really my favorite stuff. When they were a little bit in your face, a little bit more in your face, a little bit more, I don't want to say heavy because they were never a heavy band, but they had a little bit more grit to them at the beginning. You know, as they played and got older, they mellowed out and became, very folk. I don't want somewhat folk. You guys know what I'm talking about. You know, they had, you could definitely see like the Dylan inspirations towards later on in the Heartbreakers careers with things like Southern accents and stuff like that, really melodic stuff. But at the beginning, they were, if you've ever seen, and I suggest you go watch it, the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers on the Old Grey Whistle Test, which was a show back in the 70s and 80s in the UK. You can find them on YouTube. There are great episodes of the Old Grey Whistle Test. You should check out Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. You should check out the Leonard Skinner one. You should check out the Thin Lizzy performances there. AC/DC had a great performance there. These are just some that off the top of my head. I'll try to link those in the description if I can. Check those out. But in that concert, he plays his gold top. Mike Campbell plays his gold top, and he plays this 50 Broadcaster, and it's just the sound of Tom Petty. And that's when I pick up a telly, I want to play Tom Petty and I want to play Blackberry Smoke, but more Tom on the Tom Petty side. But that's my number 8 because that guitar that's a famous one. That's a famous guitar, and I would love to have that one. Coming in at number 7. This was a tough one. Because Keith Nelson of Buckcherry. Again, this is probably somebody that not a lot of people are going to know unless you're a guitar player and you're into this whole thing like you and I are. Keith Nelson is in one of my favorite bands, Buckcherry. And I always said to myself, if I was to have an original band, what would that band look like? And it would probably be in the vein of Buck Cherry or the Black Crows or Blackberry Smoke, something like that. I mean, like Hinder. I kind of liked Hinder because they were kind of that, but not so. Maybe a little bit more in your face. But Keith Nelson's sound, Keith Nelson's tone, his just right at you drive distortion sound is exactly what my sound is. I love that. He's got great control, great riffs and stuff like that. I love it. But he also does a lot of producing. He produces, I think, My Chemical Romance, Papa Roach. I think he's produced a bunch of those people, and he has an amazing collection. I could have chosen 10 guitars from Keith Nelson in this episode. But how do I, and I thought I was going to get hate for this in the comments if I didn't put this in, how do you not choose a 58 Carina Flying V to put in your top 10 list? And people might be saying I'm nuts for putting it at number 7. But there are a lot of, I had to sit down and really think about where to put these guitars, but my number 7 pick would be a 1958 Carina Flying. I've never played one. I mean, I've never played any of these guitars, to be honest with you, that are that old and vintage. But that is a special guitar. There were not many of them made. They didn't sell well. That's why they weren't made a lot. They didn't get popular till after their demise, essentially. But I would love to have that in my collection. V's are always there. There are 2 guitars that really fit my playing style, but I tend to not use them because the V, it's not very comfortable to play when you're just sitting down. You have to have it sitting in between your legs, unless you're standing up with it. And I had one for a long time, and I'll talk about V's more later. But V's are always one of those guitars that I feel very comfortable with standing and playing. And I can always get around them pretty good. The last guitar that we are going to talk about in this show, because I'm only doing numbers 10 through 6, number 5 through 1 will be on another episode. Number 6 is going to be Dave Amato's 1959 Les Paul Custom. This was, if I'm correct, I think I'm correct, this was the first episode of Gibson's The Collection. And this show is completely different than any show after this. The production value of this show skyrocketed. I don't know if it was because of how well the first show did, but I watched this episode. I've had to watch this episode 50 times since it came out, maybe more. And it's a short one as far as, these episodes go. The episodes now go for over an hour. This episode was 23 minutes, 24 minutes, something like that. And Dave Amato has a collection in a warehouse, and they just open up the door to this warehouse, and what you're seeing there is the warehouse, and it's just shelves upon shelves upon shelves of guitars. And underneath that shelf that you see where Mark is standing in the back are cases, like storage cases, that you could bring 5, 6, 7 guitars in the case and then bring them on the road with you, right? They're like these big travel cases, but he wasn't using them for traveling. He was using them just to store guitars in them. And every one of these episodes has a black Les Paul Custom. Every single one of them. There's not going to be an episode that does not have a black Les Paul Custom. There's not going to be an episode that doesn't have a cherry red 335. There's not going to be an episode that doesn't have Les Paul Juniors and Les Paul Specials. All of these episodes are going to have that. So I had to have a Les Paul on here. I had to have especially a Les Paul Custom, because those are one of my favorite guitars of all time. I picked this one, and I'm sure Peter Frampton's is very similar. They all kind of, like I said, every single one of these artists have one of these. I wanted to put this one on the episode because I wanted to give this episode some love, because, like I said, it was the inaugural show, the first show of the collection, and it's probably my favorite episode because Dave is such an interesting guy. I feel like I could sit down and have a beer with Dave and just talk about guitars, and he'd be really super cool about it. I love the 3 pickup version. I love all of them. I love the 2 pickup version as well. I love the uncovered pickup versions. I love the staple pickup versions because during all of these episodes, you see all iterations of this, but nothing is cooler looking. Let's be honest. There is not a single guitar in the world that is cooler than that 3 pickup, gold parts, gold Bigsby Les Paul custom. You just don't get better than that. Another thing about this show is that it shows you that there are different types of collectors. So Dave is one of those collectors that is like he's trying to fill a need of having a complete collection. And I have that part of me as well, which is probably why I like that episode so much, because there's a part of this episode where I want to say it's a reverse flying V's, right? Because he's very famous. Dave's very famous for playing flying V's, and he shows his set. He has sets of guitars, right? So he has a set of Carina guitars, which is like a 1983 Carina Explorer V, and Moderne. He has a set of those 3. He also had the reverse flying V's, which look like arrows, if you've ever seen a reverse flying V. And he had a black one and a white one. And Mark was like, "Oh, do you have the natural one?" And he's like, "They come in natural?" And I could be wrong if I could be getting the colors mixed up. If I am, just leave it in the comments. I'm sure you'll correct me. But he's like, "What do you mean? There's a natural one? I got to buy a natural one?" And you could feel the anxiety in his voice because he didn't have the complete collection that he thought he had. He thought he had the complete collection. And I've done that. I've absolutely done that in my years of collecting, where I wanted one of every Gibson model at one point. I wanted a Les Paul, I wanted a Explorer, I wanted a V, I wanted a Firebird, I wanted an SG, just so I could say I have all of the models that Gibson has. And then at one point, I was like, you know what? I want as many Beatles guitars as I want. And I wanted a 325 Rick, and I wanted a Tennessean and a Country Gentleman and a Rick 12 string like George. And you go through phases like that. And there are some collectors that are like that. And Dave is kind of one of those where he gets the collection, he puts them in a case, and he puts those cases on a shelf, and that's it. He calls it a day. And he's satisfied with knowing he has that, because this obviously isn't in his house. It's in some remote location, probably in California, in Los Angeles somewhere. These aren't sitting around his house, right? And that's a collector all on its own, right? Where you just store these things because they're objects that you want. I'm sure his house is full of guitars. I'm not saying he doesn't care about these instruments. He absolutely cares for these instruments. He takes some of these instruments out on the road. He says he doesn't take the real old ones out on the road because he's scared of them breaking or getting lost, and the value of them. So he prefers to play the modern clones of these guitars, which sound really, really good as well. But if you go back to the John Shanks, if I can go back, I'll just go back to the John Shanks picture. He's got these guitars all over his house. He's got a studio. He's got 50 guitars in a studio. He has this vault, which was like a wine cellar. He converted into a guitar cellar and has guitars laying all over the place. That's a different collector, in my opinion. This guy is collecting these things. He's using them on a daily basis. Again, he doesn't take out on tour the really old stuff. He'll take out the reissues of things. But this guy knows the minutia of these guitars, and that's a completely different animal, right? Me personally, I like everything to be fully original when I collect something. If I'm going to buy a vintage guitar, I want it to be like it came out of the factory. And I'm like that with everything. I'm like that with cars too. I have an old truck. I have an old Ford truck. No Ford jokes, you Chevy people. But I have an old Ford truck. And when I was going shopping, and not going shopping, when I was looking to buy an old truck, I wanted to make sure everything was original on. I want original paint. I want original parts. And if they're going to get changed, I want to change them. Right? If they're going to break, I want to fix them, kind of thing. And that's how I am with guitars as well. I want original stuff. If I go on Facebook or Craigslist and I see a guitar that has, Seymour Duncan pickups installed in it, I'm probably going to skip out on it because I want the originals. And that doesn't mean that they're better or worse. Those Seymour Duncans could probably be a lot better than maybe the stock Gibson pickups that were in there. But I want stuff to be original. So I like the fact that this show shows you that there are different types of collectors as well. Um, so that's 10 through 6 of my favorite guitars from the show, Gibson The Collection. I really hope they don't copyright strike me on any of this. Part 2 is going to be coming soon. And if you wouldn't mind sharing some love, subscribing to me, subscribing to the channel, hitting the bell so you get updates. I'm going to do a live show next week. We're going to go on Guitar Safari Live. Either I'll go on Facebook Marketplace or I'll go on Craigslist. And if you're on here and you're chatting with me, tell me your city and I'll type your city in and we can go on Safari in a town near you. But until next time, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you later.